Depending on how long you've been around, Dead Rising's risen from the dead more times than its subject matter. The original in 2006, then you had Chop Till You Drop in 2009 for the Wii, and then in 2016 again for that time's current gen systems. And now, once again, for 2024 in Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster. And that's one thing to be remembered. This is a remaster, not a remake. And let's be honest, how many times are we gonna get a remaster of this? We don't know. It's a little bit like Assassin's Creed in that way. Capcom thinks just one more time might be the charm. We're gonna dive into this, review it, sound, music, voice, cover everything. As you guys know, these are non-sponsored. If you get a chance, check out the Patreon. Subscribe is always helpful. And that fits this game. An always helpful main character out there to save the lives of others, though he's consistently reluctant to do so. And that's Frank West. In Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster, this is a zombie outbreak that's devastated a small town, leaving you and a handful of survivors and a few people you'd rather not see alive, in a nod to Dawn of the Dead, as I said during the preview. The majority of the game takes place in this sprawling mall, a sandbox of chaos where nearly every single store and location offers items, weapons, other gear, costumes, and enemies to fight. The game's all about being open mall, which is good for back then when malls actually existed. You can leap onto motorbikes and sometimes on cars and blast down tunnels to find shortcuts. You can get perfect strikes on zombie groups with hot pink bowling balls and then find the local cigar and weapon shop, outfit yourself with some Bud Case samurai and broadswords, and fillet a couple thousand undead. Stop for a quick juice at the orange juice stand, grab a pie or two, and shove them into your pockets for later going. It all sounds chaotic, and it is. At some point, I imagine Frank, Raspberry Pi leaking out of his old man stretch Levi's, each pocket stretched to capacity by guns, milk cartons, and spare weapons, just enjoying the hell out of himself as he wonder slays through the mall. And that translates directly into the player enjoying it too. But it's not only the third-person antics and the interesting story, it's the sense of humor, the open-endedness, and for the most part, the gameplay that kept my childhood brain alight back then with ideas that has been translated solidly into today. Not everything's been translated, though. First, let's talk about the graphics. There are changes that are noticeable. The lighting's improved, as are a huge amount of textures on characters. The difference is noticeable, even from the prior remake. Higher resolution and a large number of options also give the remaster a nicer sheen to it. But Dead Rising's always been known for one thing, and that is zombies. Tons of them, all of them, thousands upon thousands of them that you can mow, throw, and sew your way through. Hordes of zombies. So many that Capcom even gave Frank a special ability to run across the enemy heads like a crowd surfing, sword swinging ninja. Sure, it's well known for its massive zombie crowds on screen, a feature that still impresses, but doesn't quite offer nearly the draw it did almost 2 decades ago. The updated character designs might appeal to some, and it might actually alienate others. The new style versus the old, it's a matter of preference, but I definitely felt myself at odds depending on which character I was looking at. Also, as you'll notice in the game, when you go into the game's outdoor areas, they don't really necessarily look ancient, but with fixed shadows and textures and more grass in places, they still definitely look old. And I would have liked to have seen a nicer step up in these spots, especially with the systems we have now and the display performance we have now on the consoles and on the PC. And when it comes to the display and the performance, that all runs very well over 100 FPS maxed out at 4K on a 4090, and it also has frame gen, which pushes it well above 150. There is a wicked bug I had though, and that's if I had frame gen on and then tried to turn it off, the game crashed instantly every time, every single time, which is sort of the opposite of frame gen. So instead of getting more, I was just getting 0. And the only way to fix this was to go to a save game that had it off already. So if you are testing this game on your system, I would say do not turn frame gen on until you're happy with the way it looks. And then if you do, be aware this might continue. This was tested on multiple drivers on the NVIDIA side, and none of them seem to fix it. However, there are some things that just continue to crop up from the old game that I would have still liked to have seen changed here. For example, Frank moves like he has a donkey-sized shit on deck. The biggest issue is when you take on the bosses, for instance, and the psychos, it's always less of an issue of utilizing their strategies against them as it is just making sure that the game's cumbersome combat doesn't get in the way. For a guy this burly, looks like he lives in a world where his state bird was mac and cheese, and it feels old at those times. Even the boss battles, many of which has you fighting enemies who sometimes are on vehicles, they'll smash into rocks and trees and zombies and get caught on metal ramps. I get the idea of a remaster, and I know it wasn't going to make those vast changes, but shuttling it this far into the current day with this many issues still cropping up, it's a little bit hard to swallow. What makes this even more noticeable is there's a wicked stutter when you're in the tunnels and driving the car through zombie hordes. It would have been a nice carefree subterranean joyride and instead turned into a desire to just get to the next point as quickly as I could. Overall, Dead Rising Deluxe Remastered is just that, but it is a mixed bag. Some of it from bringing the problems of the past into the present, and other issues like crashes and that wicked stutter seemingly introduced almost completely in this one. Luckily, other parts of the presentation are not as rough or as spotty. The first thing when it comes to the audio and the voice, you got Ritello, you got Olsen, and now you have Jace Patrick. It's the same lines and the same jokes and cheese, so that part works, but I don't feel like the delivery has the great intonation, especially in some of the more classic lines that Frank delivers through the game, especially when the plot goes deeper. It's not bad. We're now so deep into the representation of this character, it can be noticeable. For newcomers, it'll be fine, however. This is more of a thing when it just comes to particular people who played this a couple times prior. Also, as we've heard before, and as we saw in the preview, they have voiced some characters that didn't have them, and that does help the level of presentation greatly. Now, Soundwork continues to also level that up. It has some improvements from the original with excellent 3D effects to help you identify when a zombie group is getting close to you or when an enemy is shooting at you from across a somewhat abandoned food court. Cutting zombies in half, blowing whatever's left of their brains out, and then leaping onto a motorbike and driving through 50 of them just so you can get a gallon of milk all sounds as good as you would hope. Some wonky or lean sound effects do crop up here and there, but at least they don't make it worse. I'm looking at you, Skyrim Special Edition. Dead Rising also has some great music, but be aware it is eclectic as hell in its musical score. It's got mall bebops and muzak to licensed music from rap to hip-hop. And it does adjust as you continue playing, and it reacts to whatever you're doing, like three thugs in a Jeep rip-snorting through the park's garden section, instantly alerting you that they must mean serious business when their music starts up. That kind of stinger moment works very well, but it does, again, show a bit of its age. I really liked it, though. Your mileage will vary. When it comes to mileage, let's talk about gameplay, because whether you're driving, whether you're riding, whether you're running, Frank puts a lot of miles on that old body. Dead Rising opens up with Frank West, wartime photographer, having received a mysterious bit of information that something weird's happened at a small town mall. Coptering in with the help of a reckless chopper pilot, the game instantly sets a tone, teaching players first about the zombie element of the story as well as the photography skill set, which has Frank taking pictures of zombies, pushing people off buildings, killing kids and school buses, and just ruining the town outside the mall. Learning that, taking in the best shots with the best framing, nets Frank the highest experience that goes along with all the other actions he does to raise his level in the main game. And I like this beginning cutscene / tutorial, and I liked it then, I like it now. I think it's a great way to teach people. What starts as a hands-off affair turns a bit more personal, though, because Frank is almost shot out of the sky and ends up leaping to the roof of a skyscraper and instantly gets mired in this conspiracy that reflects the best aspects of these kind of undead movies. Outright consumerism, mankind's misuse of what he has, and what people would be like if they were the sole survivors in a zombie mallpocalypse. Dead Rising is a pretty solidly built third-person action game in the old style, though. You got running, jumping, climbing, shooting, and swinging and dodging. Most weapons have combos of some kinds, even if they're simple. You can attack freely without aiming, but holding the X button or a button on your keyboard allows you to throw pretty much everything at the enemy as well. And it's the weapons, the sheer breadth of use of items in the game world that originally made Dead Rising so unique and continues to do so here. You can pick up pretty much anything, and they all have a different effect on enemies. For example, sledgehammers, which you can find in most of the garden centers, can do 180 swings, clearing out zombies in front of you, but also turned into a power slam, which instantly kills most enemies right in front of you with one hit, but does leave you open to getting hit from the side, because apparently Frank still got those notoriously bad back issues, causing him to take a while to get back into form and be able to swing or dodge again. When it comes to ranged attacks, you can throw most any of the up-close items, but you can also find handguns, sniper rifles, shotguns, and more. As you kill and explore and meet the few remaining human freaks still living inside the rip-off Kmarts and Sears and GameStops, Frank's levels go up, giving him more advanced moves. One of the first is a jump kick attack, but his aim is closer to the old Assassin's Creed titles, where you think you're leaping to the right and magically dust yourself by leaping into the ether. You also get moves like a running back charge and crowd walking, all which helps you navigate through the undead hordes that end up clogging the tunnels and the walkways and the stores and the mini rides all inside the mall. But there's been some improvements here. For example, in the original Dead Rising, there was no consistently available durability meter, so you had to sort of count attacks manually to avoid your weapon breaking in the middle of a fight. And that break causes Frank to be stunned a bit, which can be deadly depending on what group you're in. In this game, the durability bar is a game changer, and you can see it right in the HUD, letting you know when a weapon is about to fail. Healing items can be eaten as they're there to restore health, or you can mix drinks, cook pizzas, and prepare other foods to boost their effectiveness. As Frank levels up, he occasionally gains extra health bars as well. Inventory management plays a crucial role in some items, like man-sized drills and chainsaws that are too large to fit in your pocket. The game's back and forth has you dropping a big weapon, healing, circling around the slow-to-react zombies, picking that big weapon back up and whacking them in the head with it. All feels really good. I like that bit where you have to decide how you're going to take the strategy of using those larger weapons. Because if you have to drop one to do something else, you really have to identify where you are. And the sense of distance and range and enemy structures around you is important. And another thing that's important is being able to move while you shoot. And in the remaster, you can do that. Huge bonus there, and it helps the game. The game also has more save points, enhanced movement for the most part, and refined controls, making it feel, I would say, comfortably better. One of the more enjoyable aspects, as I said before, is the photography. And this is a key point of Frank's job. As you continue to do so, you're trying to set up scenes where somebody ends up getting stabbed, or perhaps you can't save an escort and they end up falling down. You can take a picture as they're being eaten, and you get different points for that. But be aware, you no longer get points for taking erotic pictures of the women in the game. They took it out. What continues to be not so great, though, despite some attempts to fix, are the escort missions. Everybody already knows what I'm talking about if you've played the game. If you haven't, this is when NPCs have a need to be saved. And because this is all timed, it can be even more frustrating. NPCs you guide have a tendency to wander a bit. They get stuck in corners and generally act pretty unpredictably, requiring consistent attention to keep the AI characters safe. But seriously, calling this AI or artificial intelligence makes about as much sense as calling blood stuffed juice, and it's just as simple, because while there were improvements made, and you can notice them if you played the originals, they still don't feel up to snuff compared to anything we see now. And personally, I would have liked to have seen a lot more work go into this, to even offer you more options for that. Moments where characters seem lost makes those missions sway between complex to challenging as you try to lead them to their destinations without them meandering off into their own demise, like a fucking child seeing a penny in the middle of a busy street. It is, again, noticeably better than the original, but there's some problems still, and there's a weak link there. And the reason why all this matters and why it's important to be aware of it is because Dead Island continues to feature this pseudo-real-time system that drives the story forward. Every action, from completing quests to crafting recipes, talking to NPCs, biking through hordes of zombies, it all ends up eating away time for the entire game. The stakes are higher at this point, and also be aware at nighttime, zombies become more aggressive, and so you have to be aware of that as well. Constantly watching the clock and trying to finish main story missions in time, but also using the gaps between stories to take on a ton of side quests or escort missions keeps me constantly looking at the clock and guesstimating just how far I could push. And that strategy and time checking just makes the game feel more enjoyable to me. And I know a lot of people don't necessarily like timers, but the way this game is structured and the way it plays out, it just doesn't bother me. I really like that. Also, at some point, you might get something that says basically, well, good try, but you're never going to find out what caused the main plot line to happen. And to their credit, Capcom lets you just continue to play through the game and save everybody else, and then sort of get out in a brute force style of manner, and then come back in your typical N+ game. That becomes even more important when you start facing the game's boss characters in the form of psychopaths as well, because trying to figure out how to do a main story section and then a psychopath in the side sections is all about that time management. And I do mean management because they are not easy. Chainsaw wielding clowns, redneck shotgun toting gun owners, or deranged grocery store register employees yelling at you from behind a shopping cart that somehow they welded a ton of sharp instruments to and they can turn on a dime. Each requires a slightly different playstyle, but in the end it's about doing more damage to them than they do to you. But the great part is they all have little weird counters or tricks that they can pull off that you might not expect. Like I said in the preview though, and it resonates here for me, is the mall itself. Even more timely when many of the malls in the game's location that it's trying to reflect and planned around aren't even in the real world anymore. It offers this awesome feeling of nostalgia to me, and possibly mystery to those who've never really seen one in a city before. Parkview is a nice-sized complex divided into about a half dozen sections with wickerwork tunnels and maintenance doors and staff-only areas to offer the player shortcuts if they can discover different ways to get them open. There's something almost magical about running into the food court, and not only does it offer you drinks you can make, but you can also cook food or cook the bottom of a fucking pan and use it to burn enemies' faces. You can stock up on some power-ups. The game's offering of these locations being not only excellent renditions of original malls, but also useful and visually informative instantly is the juice. You find a shop and you can almost always guess exactly what's inside instantly. Grab a hockey stick, shoot some pucks into the undead, throw plastic toy horse heads over zombies so that you blind them, plastic bats and shotguns and soccer balls. Hell, you can even grab a couple electric guitars and make your own guitar solo by 360 swinging them into groups of enemies. There's a sense of experimentation that always comes out here, as well as the way Frank can dress. You have all kinds of different uniforms you can get from the different stores and different locations that you find. Let's talk about fun factor and how all of these situations come together. Is Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster fun? Yes, it absolutely is, especially when it dives directly into the B-movie tier moments. Frank wondrously, stupidly has these facial expressions during cutscenes that are real time, by the way. And so him walking and talking about a global conspiracy while dressed as a princess that looks like they're from Zelda cracks me up. When the original came out, the story's twist had me excited and a little bit surprised. It's got a bit of a Resident Evil kind of vibe to it at times, not just because of the zombies, but some other stuff that pops up. Also, working through the timer and trying to figure out how to save as many people as possible just works for me. No matter how many times I start to play this game and think to myself, I'm just going to worry about me and nobody else, I end up hearing that somebody needs help, and I start hearing somebody fighting some zombies, and I end up helping them anyway. Here's the thing, though. Many games can be remastered with relative ease as they're backed up by robust gameplay mechanics, even back when they originally came out, and despite changes to Frank's moveset, when shooting, added books, and some other quality of life, it still does feel old, and that's because the original Dead Rising did not have the greatest mechanics, but it was still at the time doing other things that we were a little less accustomed to. To newer gamers who play this, who've been playing current games, this could be pretty frustrating. To somebody who's played the older games and they're just trying to get in, less so. But it's mostly when Frank's fighting, which sucks because you do it a lot. It's when Frank's sword seemingly swings through an enemy like you're fucking fighting Beetlejuice, or when a kick just doesn't impact, or when you're fighting a psychopath who patently ignores gravity, physics, hell, all of reality by attacking you through objects that you can't get through. That is quite frustrating. When it comes to the main game itself, I did not have crashes. Performance was relatively above average, if not actually great, for all the locations that I went to, except for those maintenance tunnels. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for a sale, deep sale, or never touch it rating system. For me, this one feels a little bit lost as a remaster. I love a ton of the changes, but the core issues, as I continued to play all the way through it, that existed in the original game, and still some brain-dead AI, cumbersome combat, and a number of old game idiosyncrasies, started to sour this one. This is a game that has its basis so far back that to replay it now without major improvements to movement, animation, and otherwise can result in an excellent idea of time quests and great B-movie cheese being lost. It's like sitting through a 2-hour movie because somebody says they like the ending. So for me, this is actually a wait. If you love Dead Rising and you want to own every version humanly possible, the game isn't bad by any means, but to me, ultimately, it made me feel more disappointment than desire to continue to play it as I worked through it longer and longer. Just enough situations that occurred that it really felt like one more remaster wasn't needed, but a remake was. So that's it for me. If you guys like these, give it a thumbs up. I would love for you guys to check out the podcast that we do on the other channel. You can check out the Patreon. No sponsored stuff. The only way we continue the channel is with the support of you guys, and I absolutely appreciate every single one of you who's ever left a comment or a like. And you'll be seeing some other reviews from me, Frostpunk 2, and Plucky Squire. Peace out, and enjoy the rest of your week.
This is my store! You came to vandalize my store, huh? Not on my watch!
Someone's been hurt. I need medicine.